Hold o'er my being absolute sway. Incredibly easy to sing, very difficult to live. Today we're going to look at the story of Samson, the original superhero, the first one who had a superpower. Literally had a superpower. His was strength. Many of you, if you've been around Christianity long or in church long or in your word, you've probably heard or seen or watched a movie or whatever, heard about Samson. And his superpower was just incredible amounts of strength. We're going to see that today. Mine is being tall and good looking. But his was strength. And he, if you know the story, there were some amazing feats that he did. He was called by God at an early age to be this way, but he did not end really well. We're going to discuss the fact that Samson had self-sabotage in his life. In fact, I would suggest to you that one of the greatest enemies of the kingdom of God is not something out there, but it's who you face in the mirror every morning. We have an incredible ability to shoot ourselves in the foot, to sabotage our potential. We looked at Gideon a couple weeks ago. Samson was the opposite of Gideon. If you remember Gideon, he was scared. He's hiding in a wine press. He's not very sure of himself. God gets him out of there, gives him some courage eventually after some time, and Gideon does accomplish what he wants, but he has some issues again at the end of his life. Samson is the opposite of that. Samson's not hiding anywhere. He's always looking for a fight. He doesn't need anyone's help, he thinks, and he is out there to take on anyone, anytime that they want to, and he just has this incredible self-worth and the self-esteem. But the problem is that both of those things, the pride or the fear, both of those have struggles when they walk with the Lord. If you remember last week, we looked at Barak, and we talked about the fact that he missed his moment. It's not that he wasn't involved with what God was doing, but he missed his moment. And it says that a woman would take his place, the place of honor in this particular battle. Jael was her name, because he wouldn't step up when God had called him. So Barak missed his moment. We talked about not missing our moments when God calls us to something. This week we're going to look at Samson, and Samson missed his potential. Absolutely missed his potential. The chapter 13 of Judges, and if you got your Bibles, go ahead and turn there or scroll there or type it in and cheat in your phones. And get to Judges 13. We're going to really start 14, but Judges 13 tells this incredible tale of how God calls Samson. And Samson is almost, the story is almost the type of the people of Israel. Samson was conceived and born in his parents' old age. They were without children, and he became blessed, just like Abraham and Sarah had a child in their own old age, and God blessed them finally with that child, and it became the Jewish nation. And the story of Samson is kind of the story of the people of Israel, if you look at it, that they started out good, and because of their own arrogance and going after their own desires, they found themselves repeatedly in trouble. And as we've been looking at Judges, we know that the cycle has gone over and over and over again, where the people get a judge and a deliverer, and they do good for a while, then they fall back into sin, and God sends the enemies upon them, and the enemies rule over them for a time, and they finally get tired of that and cry out to the Lord, and they send another judge. And the last judge in the book of Judges is Samson, and he gets sent. He is a beast of a man because of supernatural power. He was told from his birth that he was to be a Nazirite. What that meant was they had to take a vow, and there are three main things that he had to do as a Nazirite. Number one, he could have nothing from the vine. No wine, strong drink, not even grape juice. Nothing from the vine was to cross his lips. Number two, he was not to touch anything dead. And number three, he was never to cut his hair. Not a big deal for some of us like John Linder. But for him, those are the things. That's what it meant to be a Nazirite. No strong drink, in fact, nothing from the vine, not even grape juice, no touching of anything dead, and not cutting his hair. Now, if you're familiar with the story of Samson enough, you remember that at the end of his life, Delilah, not the lady on the radio, but some of you young don't even know who that is, do you? Sorry, I'm old. Used to have a radio show. Name was Delilah. Anyway, a lady named Delilah talks him into telling the secret of his strength, and she cuts his hair and he loses his strength. And I want to start at the end of the story and work our way backwards. Again, the reason that he had this great power was because God was blessing him, because God made a covenant with him. And the covenant was no drink, no touching anything dead, and no cutting your hair. And he would win these victories. The problem was that the Philistine people were an oppression over the Israelites. For a long time they were oppressing them, and God was tired, and it was time to judge them for what they'd done, and so he was bringing Samson along. But Samson, instead of ruling and reigning from the blessing, place of blessing that he had, was actually cavorting with the enemy. And Delilah was a Philistine. And he hooks up with her there in chapter 16. If you want to turn there for just a minute. And you think, oh, this is his first wife. No. Part of Samson's trouble. We'll talk about that as we go through. But I want to start at the end and then work our way forward. Samson has, in the course of his life, has defeated 1,000 men by himself. Took on 30 men one other time, a huge group another time, and the Philistines are getting tired of getting whipped by one guy. And so once he gets hooked up with Delilah, they come to Delilah and says, we'll each give you 1,100 pieces of silver if you can just find out from him what his secret to his strength is. There was no man that could stand against Samson, but it would be the woman who brought him down. And she does. Chapter 16, she asked him, in verse 4, this woman that he loved, Delilah, the lords of the Philistine came to her, again, offered her money to find out what it is. So verse 6, Delilah said to Samson, please tell me your great strength is and how it may be bound to afflict you. No. What? How do I tie you up so I can afflict you? Women have such control over us. We are absolutely stupid. Oh, okay, I'll tell you. Well, he messes with her at first. He says to her, verse 7, well, if they bind me with 7 fresh cords that have not been dried, then I shall become weak and like any other man. So she puts him to sleep. She brings 7 fresh cords. She ties him up. She's got Philistines hiding in another room in the house. And she wakes him up after she has him tied. The Philistines are here to get you, Samson. And they come rushing out, and Samson stands up, and it says he snaps the cords like they're nothing. And then he whips them. Verse 10. Then Delilah said to Samson, behold, you have deceived me and told me lies. Now please tell me how you may be bound. Why does he even keep talking to her? Well, if I only had 7 cords on me that had never been dried, that would work. And he wakes up and he's got 7 cords on him. Where do you think they came from, Samson? He said, quit lying to me. And so he keeps messing with her. Verse 11, he said to her, well, if they bind me tightly with new ropes, which have never been used, not dried, then I shall become weak like any other man. He's just plain. He knows what it's all coming from. So she does it again, and there's Philistines in wait, and she yells and wakes him up, and they come running out, and he stands up and he snaps those like nothing, and he puts a whooping on them, right? Then Delilah said to Samson, verse 13, up to now you have deceived me. Wait, excuse me? Who's deceiving who, right? And told me lies. Tell me how you may be bound. And he said to her, if you weave the 7 locks of my hair with the web and fasten it with a pin, then I shall become weak like any other man. Now, I want you to notice something here. Again, for those of us who know the spoiler, that it is his hair that has the strength, I want to make this clear. The length of his hair did not give him strength. The length of the hair was the vow that he had made to God. It was a sign of the commitment. What gave him the power was his covenant relationship with the Lord. And when he allowed his hair eventually to be cut, he broke that covenant. That's what it was. It was not the hair. I want you to know that as a guy who doesn't have much, all right? But notice how dangerously close he's getting. Now he's gone from just tying me up with certain kinds of rope. Now he's playing with fire. And he's giving her a little hint. Well, I got 7 locks of hair. I have 7 hairs. It's different, but he had 7 locks of it. She said, if you weave that and put a pin in it, then I'd be weak like any other man. And so she puts him to sleep again. And she weaves his hair and puts that pin in it. And has guys waiting in the room. I'm thinking, what guys are signing up for this duty? And so she screams, "Oh, the Philistines are here to get you, Samson." And he stands up, takes the pin out of his hair, and whips them all. Verse 15. Then she said to him, "How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me?" When the woman says, "If you love me, you would," you're getting ready to give up your motorcycle. That's what that means. The women aren't laughing, it's just the guys. I don't know why that is. She said to me, "How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me?" Now, it does say earlier that he did love her. And she plays it. She switches it and she just really pours it on. If you love me, you really would tell me, quit messing with me, quit teasing me. You have deceived me where your strength is. And it came about, verse 16, when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him that his soul was annoyed to death. That's what my version says. Annoyed to death. So he told her all that was in his heart and said to her, "A razor has never come on my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaved, then all my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man." And when Delilah saw that he had told her all that was in his heart, she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, "No, really, this time it will work. Come up once more, for he has told me all is in his heart." Then the lords of the Philistines came up, and they brought her money in her hands, and she made him sleep on her knees, and called for a man, and had him shave off the 7 locks of his hair. Then she began to afflict him, and the strength left him. Then she said, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." And he awoke from his sleep and said, "I will go out as at other times and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. I do not know. Same way we all don't. It's a slow fade. My question is, you see the end of this story and knowing who he has been, how does he get here? What makes him even conceive of telling her the secret to the strength? It's because he didn't believe that it would really matter. And I'm going to show you why. Because of those 3 vows, no drink, no fruit of the vine, no touching of dead bodies, and no cutting hair, he broke the first 2 right out of the stall. And yet he still had strength. God was still using him. And it's that slow fade in our lives where we sabotage ourselves and we make one little incremental decision to not walk in the righteousness of God, and the next one gets easier, and the next one gets easier, and God is still trying to be with us and still trying to work with us. And so when he gets to this point where the last thing he hasn't broken is his haircut, he thinks, well, I drank, I touched dead bodies, and I was okay. And notice what it says there, "I will go in as at other times and shake myself free." God said, "Not this time." And the moment came when God said, if you're going to break all the vows, then we are not in covenant relationship, and you no longer have my strength. And that's when he said one of the saddest words in this whole story is, but he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. That's because he'd been walking away from God most of his adult life. So it got to the point that he didn't even notice it at first. And he went out to fight, verse 21. The Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes, and they brought him down to Gaza and bound him with the bronze chains, and he was a grinder in the prison. They put him on a big stick with a millstone. Apparently he still had muscles. He was strong like another guy, but he didn't have the supernatural strength. And they had him grinding wheat, pushing. Remember the old Schwarzenegger movie? That's what he did. He pushed the millstone around. That's how I picture Samson without the Austrian accent. But he went from being the superhero, the first superhero with a superpower of God's strength, to being blind and grinding wheat in the prison of the foreigners, of the pagans who were opposing God. How in the world do you get there? Let's go back to chapter 14 and work our way forward. In Judges 13, the two verses right before we get 14, the last two verses, it says, then the woman gave birth, that's Samson's mother, to a son, and she named him Samson. And the child grew up, and the Lord blessed him. So he's under a blessing. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him in Manahadan, between Zorah and Eshtaol. So he was blessed, and the Spirit of the Lord began to move in him. And then look at the first line in chapter 14. Then Samson went down to Timnah, which is a Philistine town, and saw a woman in Timnah, one of the daughters of the Philistines. So he came back and told his father and mother, I saw a woman in Timnah, one of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me as a wife. That's how I guess it used to work back then. But that first line in verse 1, then Samson went down to Timnah. I think that's symbolic. His life started going down from this very moment. He was coming of age. He was becoming a man under blessing and under the Spirit of God. And one of the first things he does in his life where his name comes up is he goes to the wrong place. He goes to the Philistine cities instead of to look for a wife among his people, which God had commanded that they do. And notice it says, I saw a woman in Timnah, now go get her for me. It doesn't say even talk to her. I just saw her. She looked good. That's the one I want. Didn't know anything about her, although he knew she was not of God. And it wasn't that God, it was, that group of people can't marry this group of people. Is about faith. Don't mix spiritual faith. And he goes and he says, I want her. And then his father and mother said to him, is there no woman among the daughters of your relatives, among our people, verse 3, that you could go to take as a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson said to his father, get her for me, for she looks good to me. That last line is probably, you could encapsulate what was wrong with Samson. It's not what God wanted for him, it's what looks good to him. She looks good. He hasn't even talked to her yet, as far as we can tell from Scripture. And he's choosing a wife, the most important decision. He said, just go get her for me. She looks good to me. Scripture says we are to honor our father and mother, and there's a reason for that. It doesn't mean they're always right. You don't have to do everything they tell you, especially when you become an adult. But God says to honor them for a reason. They've been around longer. They understand things differently than you do. I know that's shocking that they may actually be smarter. He says, honor that. There was wisdom in his parents. They were godly parents too. That's why God chose them. And they wouldn't listen. He wouldn't listen to them. He wouldn't listen to the law of God. Now verse 4 says that they did not know that this was from the Lord. It's hard to understand in the Hebrew. The best I can understand is that even though he was doing something wrong, that God was going to use it for his purpose, and his purpose was to punish the Philistines. Not that God wanted him to marry into another faith, but he was going to use it for that purpose. So that's his first step down was he did not honor his parents, he did not honor the word of the Lord, and he began the slow fade of his life. And so Samson went down to Timnah with his father and mother, and they came as far as a vineyard. And behold, a young lion came roaring toward him. Verse 6, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily, so that he tore him as one tears a young goat, though he had nothing in his hands. But he did not tell his father and mother what he had done. The best I can understand here is they were all going down to this town together. The parents gave in, which was their problem. And they're going down, and for some reason, he separates from his mom and dad, and he goes towards the vineyard. Vow for a Nazirite, nothing from the vine. What's he going to a vineyard for himself? Scripture says we are to flee temptation. We should not be in a place where we shouldn't be. That doesn't help a thing. And yet, here he goes and he walks into this vineyard, probably to eat grapes. He is so arrogant, so prideful, he knows the power that is in him that he thinks it really won't matter. And he's in a vineyard, and it says a young lion comes running towards him, and yet the Spirit of the Lord is still going to use him, and it comes upon him mightily, and he tears it as one tears a young goat. Maybe that was a sport back then. What do you want to do tonight? I know, I thought we'd tear some goats. I don't know. I wasn't there. I guess the idea is that, like, maybe you physically by your hands could kill a young goat, but you couldn't kill a lion. He would kill a lion like somebody else might be able with their bare hands to end a goat. I don't know. All I know is he killed this lion with his bare hands, but he doesn't tell his parents. The next verse says he went down and talked, verse 7, to the woman, and she looked good to Samson. So he finally talks to her, you know. At some point later, they were setting up the feast. He comes back down that way, and he goes by the body of the lion that he killed, and the scavengers have already come. The carcass is dying, and animals have already been eating on it, and there was a hole in the cavity of the lion. Makes you all ready for lunch, doesn't it? And some bees had set up a hive inside the carcass of the lion. And you say, why? And I say, I don't know. And he sees that, and it looks good to him. Verse 9, so he scraped the honey into his hands and went on eating as he went. And he came to his father and mother, and he gave some to them, and they ate it. Here's a line. But he did not tell them that he had scraped the honey out of the body of a lion. What's the other part of the Nazirite vow? Touch nothing dead. And not only touch something that was dead, he took something out of it and was eating it, extra defilement. And he knew it was wrong because he didn't tell his parents where it came from, because they wouldn't have eaten it either. He's in a vineyard. He's touching dead bodies, breaking two of the vows. Not big deals. It wasn't the body of a human. That was more what God was thinking, but it still was death. And he was touching it and eating from it. And we begin to see the slow fade. And the power hasn't left him yet. That's why I believe he thinks, even if they cut my hair, I'm still going to have my power. The father went down, verse 10, to the woman, and Samson made a feast. The word there in Hebrew basically means a drinking feast. They used to have a 7-day wedding. They partied for 7 days in the Israelite camp. Hannah, you guys, 7-day wedding coming up? No? That'd be fun. You get to be kings and queens for a week. All your friends have to do whatever you tell them. That'd be fun. Your brothers, you could tell your brothers everything they had to do. That'd be awesome, wouldn't it? They're engaged, by the way. If that was a surprise, I'm sorry. She's got the ring on. She's been rolling it. Everybody knows. This big thing, but it was a drinking party. Again, what he was not supposed to be doing, he was doing. This slow fade, little decisions here and there. Verse 11, and it came about when they saw him that they brought 30 companions to be with him. Now this tells us something else about Samson. He came alone to his wedding. He had no friends of his own. They had to bring him companions of the Philistines. One of the most dangerous things you and I can do as a Christian is live it out on our own. We're going to talk about that at the end of the message here in just a minute. And like they used to do at a lot of these parties, they would share riddles. And it's, kind of like, at a baby shower, wedding shower, they play the games and you try to figure it out. That's what they did, but they like to use riddles. And so he decides that he's going to mess with these 30 Philistines. And he said, tell you what, I'll give you a riddle. If you can figure out in the 7 days we have here at this party, if you figure it out, I'll give you, all 30 of you, each a new set of clothing. But if I win and you can't figure it out, then you have to give me 30 sets of clothing. They said, that's fine. You're a stupid Israelite. We're a brilliant Philistine. Bring it on. And so this was his riddle, verse 14. Out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet. Well, he's talking about the lion that had the honey inside the carcass. He thought, there ain't no way they're going to figure that out. And that's what happened. They couldn't figure it out. Verse 15 and on, they finally come to the woman after a few days. They can't figure it out, to who's going to be his new wife, and said, look, if you don't find out from him what the riddle is, we're not going to be humiliated by this big meathead, right? You tell us what the secret is to this riddle, or we're going to kill you and your father. Good. It was a great honeymoon, wasn't it? And so she does that. Verse 17, here it is again. She wept before him 7 days while their feast lasted. And it came about on the 7th day that he told her, because she pressed him so hard. She then told the riddle to the sons of her people. So the men of the city came to him on the 7th day before the sun went down, and they said, what is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion? And he said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would have not found out my riddle. Guys, I really have to explain the lesson for you in this. That is not the word to call your wife. Needless to say, he wasn't happy with her, and he wasn't happy with them. But who's the problem? Samson. He's the one that told it. And he said, verse 19, that, but the Spirit of the Lord still came upon him mightily, and he went down to Ashkelon, a 23-mile trek, and killed 30 men of the Philistines, took their spoil, and gave the change of clothes to those who had told the riddle. And his anger burned, and he went up to his father's house. But Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his friend. So he is so mad at her for telling, and so mad at them for forcing her to do this, he just takes off running. The Spirit of the Lord's on him. He runs 23 miles to another city. He kills 30 guys, takes their clothing off of them, brings it back, gets back before the news can get back, and he hands it to him. Now, just my suggestion, those clothes probably weren't very enjoyable to wear. They're probably covered in blood as he killed him and stripped him and brought him back. And he was so mad that he just walked away from the whole thing. And the father of the woman gave his wife to a friend. He had such anger, such rage. And we see here that not only did he have no friends, we see him very little working with anyone in authority. We see him not working with an army or with a group of advisors, nothing. And very little prayer time. There's 2 prayers in the whole story of Samson. It's all about what he wants. Now, God is using this for our purposes, even though he is not where he needs to be. God continues to use it to stir up the Philistines and to bring judgment upon them. Chapter 15, it says, after a while, at harvest time, he decided, you know what, I'm over my anger. I'm going to go back and see my wife. I'm going to take a young goat. I don't know what it is about young goats, but there's another one. I'll go to my wife in her room, but her father did not let him enter. The father said, I really thought you hated her intensely, so I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister more beautiful than she? Please let her be yours instead. Then Samson said to them, this time I shall be blameless in regard to the Philistines when I do them harm. So Samson went and caught 300 foxes and took torches and turned the foxes tail to tail and put one torch in the middle between the two tails. And he set fire to the torches, released the foxes into the standing grain of the Philistines, and burning up both the shocks and the standing grain along with the vineyards and the groves. Don't know how you catch the 300 foxes, but he did. Hooks their tails together, puts a torch in between them, lights a torch, and sends them free and run through the grain fields, and he burns it all down. He's so angry. And the Philistines found out that he did it because of the father of this bride who had given his wife away. So they kill the bride finally and the father. And Samson then was even more angry. Verse 7, since you act like this, I will surely take revenge on you, but after that I will quit. He struck them ruthlessly with a great slaughter, and he went down and lived in the cleft of the rock. Now we don't know how many he killed here. It just says he just went all off on them. And there's a great slaughter. Now because of time, we're not going to read the rest of it, but he's hiding in the rock somewhere. And the army of the Philistine marches against the people of Israel. And they come to the people of Israel, and the people of Israel say, why are you marching against us? We haven't done anything. He says, we want Samson. And if you bring Samson to us, we won't destroy you. So listen to this. The Israelites, the brothers of Samson, they take 3,000 men to go get him. You know you're pretty tough when they bring 3,000 guys to try to take you. And so they come to Samson and say, look, the army is up against us, and you know they're our lords and our masters, which was the problem. And he says, look, they want us to bring you to them. And he says, we want to bind you and take you, please. Please. Samson says, you promise you won't kill me yourself? Yeah, we won't kill you. We'll just bind you. He says, all right, knock yourself out. Like, bring me right into the enemy's camp. That'd be awesome. So they do. They bind him with these ropes. They bring him before the Philistine army. And we have brought him to you. And it says, when he gets there, verse 14, when he came to Lehi, the Philistines shouted as they met him and said, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily, that the ropes that were on his arms were as flax that is burned with fire, and his bonds dropped from his hands. He found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, so he reached out and took it and killed 1,000 men with it. Then Samson said, with the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey, I have killed 1,000 men. And it came about when he had finished speaking that he threw the jawbone from his hand, and he named the place Ramath-Leah. He gets down there and says, yeah, take me to the army. And he breaks the bonds again, and there's a dead donkey there apparently, a fresh one it says. Again, touching the dead. He tears the jawbone off, and he kills 1,000 men by himself and piles them in a heap. And it says as soon as he killed all 1,000 of them, it says he wrote a song. Notice he doesn't drop the jawbone until he writes the song. Heap upon heap, he says, the jawbone of a donkey, I've killed 1,000 men. And then he dropped it like he dropped a mic. Boom. Maybe that was the donkey's name, Mike. He dropped the mic. Heap upon heap. He killed 1,000 men by himself. But all this slow fade, doing things that he knew were not right for him to do. Verse 20, he judged Israel for 20 years. Chapter 16, verse 1, now Samson went to Gaza and saw a harlot there, and he went into her. And it was told to the people in town that he's in the harlot's house. Let's all lie in wait for him. That's always a great plan for the man who killed 1,000 people with a jawbone. You go lie in wait for him. I'm going to bed. They said, well, wait till morning. Maybe he'll be groggy and tired and probably hungover, which was his problem. It says, but he got up at midnight and knew they were after him. It says he went to the city gates, which they had locked him in. And you can read the story later. It says he grabbed the gate and the bar that was locking it and pulled it and the post out of the ground and put the whole gate on his shoulders and walked 38 miles uphill towards Hebron and stuck the gate up on top of the hill. Now, what is the lesson for that, for us? Nothing. But you got to tell that story if he did it, right? And he did it, so they wrote it down. He ripped the gate and the post out of the ground and the bar, and he carried it 38 miles uphill and set it on the hill. I'm guessing when he ripped the gate out of the ground that the people who were lying in wait decided, I'm getting kind of tired. I'm going to bed. And they left him alone. I just had to tell that part of the story. Verse 4 says, after this it came about, he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek. His name was Delilah. And we've already read that story. How in the world does he give his secret away, the last thing he hadn't broken? It's because all the small decisions to sin didn't immediately shut him down, and that slow fade finally worked where he thought, I'm going to shake this off too, even if they cut my hair. It won't stop me. But God left him. It wasn't the hair, but God left him. Verse 22 of chapter 16, however, the hair of his head began to grow again after it was shaved off. I mean, obviously, literally, that's what it means, but I think what it means was that as he is standing there blinded, very often how they would do that is a hot poker they would stick in the eye first, and they would gouge out what was left. And he's sitting down in prison with the strength of a normal man who is now blind and grinding at a millstone. Yet he was born to be the deliverer of Israel. He missed his potential because he sabotaged himself by slow increments of walking away from God. But God's superpower is different than anybody else's. His superpower is forgiveness. And as Samson is in prison, the Philistines call all the lords from around to their god Dagon's temple, and they say, look, everybody come here. Our god Dagon has given us the power to capture Samson. And so they're all partying. There's 3,000 people up on the roof of this house. And they're all drinking and drunk, and they're yelling, let's get Samson out here and make fun of him. So they drag him out, this blind man being led by a child. And Samson says to the kid, hey, I'm kind of tired. Can you show me where the main pillars of the house are that hold it up? Well, can't you lean on any wall? No, I'd really like to lean on those. So the boy takes him there, and he prays to the Lord. Probably for the first time, Lord, what do you need? And it says he put one hand on one pillar and one hand on the other. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he leaned into it with all his might. And he said, let me die with the Philistines. And he brought the whole house down on them and him. And it says he killed more on that day than he had killed in his whole life. What are the lessons we learned from this story today? Number one, we have to control our desires. We can't live impulsively in the flesh. Paul says you can't walk in the Spirit and walk in the flesh. It is absolutely impossible. If you walk in the flesh, you make yourself an enemy of God. There is no power if we make ourselves an enemy of God. One of our pastors this week on our email group wrote a story to us, and he said, I got thinking of the 4 most influential pastors in my early pastoral ministry that made such an impact on my life. And he started listing these 4 men. Most of you would know their names. Large, prominent figures in the church, but some of their writings, some of their teachings planted, and made some of the largest churches in this country. And he wrote about what each one of them had done for him. And then he says, you know what all 4 of these men have in common? They've all fallen to sexual sin. And he says, I remember being one of those conferences, one of those men were leading, and the man got up to talk, and he says, I want you pastors to know that there are Satanists right now who are gathering to pray to their God that you and I and all the main pastors that the world sees would fall and fail sexually. Satan is praying for the demise of pastors, and particularly through sexual sin. Women may not understand this, but men, I don't have to explain it to you. It is our Achilles heel. The temptation and the lust. And there are those praying for our fall. I heard a pastor talking about this week. He's talking to a young group of pastors. He said, if you cannot control your pornography in your life or your sexual temptation and your lust, he said, I'm telling you right now, do not join the ministry, because there is an expiration date stamped on your ministry. You will fall if we live impulsively and don't control our desires through the power of God. Samson missed his potential. What story would have been if Samson would have been Samson and on fire for the Lord and not self-sabotaging? Not only did he not control his desires, he compromised his integrity with God. As I said, the slow fade is so incredibly dangerous because we don't really feel it happening until God is no longer there and we almost don't even notice it. He did not know that the Lord was not with him. Number 3, we learn from this, one of the problems with his self-sabotage was that Samson was unteachable. If someone were to ask you, are you teachable? If there's something in your life that is wrong and somebody talks to you about it, how do you take that? Usually not very well at first. But can you be taught? Can you be corrected? Samson wasn't going to be corrected. His parents tried to correct him. He said, just get me the woman. Number 4, he was a loner. I want to read one verse to you from the English Standard Version, Proverbs 18:1. If you're taking notes, write this down, and you can look at it later. Proverbs 18:1 says this, whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire, he breaks out against all sound judgment. He rages against sound judgment, and he will become selfish in his own desires if you isolate yourself. Spell check, right? Certain ones, they'll give you another couple words. Would you like that one spelled wrong? Stupid. Would you like one of these? Right? Wouldn't that be nice in life decisions? Oh, you're about ready to make a really dumb choice. Here are 3 good options. That's what friends are supposed to be. That's what spiritual friends are supposed to be. They grab you by the ear and say, look, I love you, man. Do not do this. You need to make another choice. One of the greatest problems Samson had was he was living his life with God, but as a loner. He didn't let anyone talk to him. And it says, whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire, which exactly he did, and he breaks out against all sound judgment, which he did. And the last thing is that brought him down was his pride. Pride in yourself makes you treat God casually because he thought he was capable of whatever he needed to do by himself. Also, when we're proud and think we can take care of ourselves, our prayer life suffers. Why do we need to talk to God? We got this handled. And pride makes us selfish. It makes us selfish. This story teaches us also that the world needed something stronger than Samson. It needed Jesus. Not strength physically, but strength spiritually. And it showed that even the strongest man that ever lived couldn't accomplish what he needed to. We needed something different. We needed something more. We needed a Savior. It also teaches us that God's superhero, his superpower, is his forgiveness. Worship team, if you come on up. Even after all his walking away from God, when Samson decided that he wanted to come back to God, God had never abandoned him. What was available to him at the beginning of his life was available to him at the end of his life if he wanted to come back. Maybe some of you are sitting here today and you know you've walked away from the Lord quite a ways and you think, I don't know, can I come back? The answer is yes, absolutely. And God granted forgiveness to Samson and gave him one last bout of strength. And he did the work that God had called him to do. The same forgiveness that Samson received is available to you today. We want to offer the invitation to come forward and say, you know, today is a day that I want to choose to give my life to Christ. And for the rest of you who already know the Lord, I ask this message to sink into your hearts and think, what is it in my life that I am doing that is sabotaging my potential for the work of the kingdom? I would love for someone creative and to write the story of Samson as if none of those things had happened and what that would have looked like in Israel. Can you imagine Samson as a leader of the armies of Israel that had that kind of strength and who was righteous? Are you missing your potential because you're sabotaging your own self by living out your desires and not his? I want you to pray about that and think about that as we sing. And if you're ready to give your life to Christ, come forward as they lead us in the song. Just stand. Amen. Lord, we just come before you, and my prayer is that you will help us to examine our hearts. Lord, that we will make sure that we are living out your kingdom work and not trying to build our kingdom. Lord, imagine what Clark County will be like, Champaign County will be like when your church lives to its potential, your potential in us. Fill our hearts today, Lord. Make us absolutely on fire for you. This is our prayer. We prayed in Jesus' name. And all said, amen.